So this is going to be a two-part assignment this week and next week, and our friend Georgia O'Keeffe is going to be the inspiration. So everybody knows quite a bit about her. She, at some point in her career, decided, and it was when they were living in New York, she decided to take this very small thing, which is a flower, and blow it up really big so New Yorkers would notice this small thing. And, you know, there's lots and lots of examples of her work. And I think I've put the link for a Pinterest page that shows a lot of her work. So you can browse through that on the Google Classroom. So quite often she included leaves. And you have a choice. If you want to do a flower, that's a great idea. But you could also do bones or a large insect. So you're taking something small and blowing it up big. Quite often she went right off the page with her flowers. I'm going to encourage you to have a little negative space like this, because I'm going to have you try some different techniques for the empty space, like salt or saran wrap. So I wouldn't go all the way, you know, off the page and zoom in too much. So you have some empty space around it. Okay, so this week, what your assignment is going to be is to do a contour drawing or a line drawing of the flower. First of all, you have to find a reference, and I posted a whole bunch of flower pictures. Many of them were from earlier in the spring when we took a walk at Daly Ranch, and I photographed some of the wildflowers. And some of them are yard flowers, but these are both from Daly Ranch, I'm pretty sure. So what I did, and I want you to use a quarter sheet. So that's this size. You can see with my hands how big it is. It's not huge, but it's not a little tiny one either. So what I've done is taken a piece of inexpensive paper, newsprint in this case, and I taped off my quarter sheet, and then I drew the space that's showing inside of the tape. So this will be my area of composition. And you might want to do a couple of them. You know, I have a couple of them set up. So if you don't section off your newsprint, you might draw it too big, because we're going to actually transfer this onto that. So I've chosen my photograph, and I think I decided I was going to do this one. And you have to decide if it's going to be vertical or horizontal. And I think because of these stems showing here, it's going to be a vertical composition. And I'm going to, first of all, let's make this, I'll use a darker pencil so you can see a little bit more what I'm doing here. And this border doesn't have to be real careful, just so long as you have an idea of what you're composing. So you might want to start with a gesture drawing. So I'll kind of look at it and show the sort of the action or the direction for placement. So I sort of have it placed on the page. I'll probably end up doing some stems. Not sure what else. Now that's the gesture. It's quick, loose. I never lifted my pencil up off the page. And I decided that looks pretty good. That's placed on the page the way I want it. Now I'm going to start doing a contour drawing where I'm really following that edge, but I'm peeking at my paper a little bit more. And I might move it over just a little bit. So I'm going to draw it dark enough so you can see it. I love the little uneven edge there. And I see this next petal here is overlapping that one. So I'm going to cover up part of that. It's a little bit narrower. It's got those little. And I need to find out what this flower is. Chris has a an app on his phone that will identify wildflowers and so on. So there's that little thing on the end there, that little pokey thing. That's kind of cool. And already I'm thinking like George O'Keeffe, is you really don't see something until you start to draw it, and you really notice things that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. So that's overlapping that. This is overlapping that one. And then finally, this last one is underlapping, if that's a word. Now here's this little more complicated part, and I have erasers handy. You can erase as much as you want on this because you're not damaging your paper. You're going to transfer all that onto the final paper. So I notice it's like this is going to be interesting, this little shape in here. It's almost like a second flower. And then there's another part, the little knotty parts of the flowers. When I transfer, I actually keep looking at the reference because every time you see something new that you didn't see before, okay, that's what I have so far. And I'm noticing this stem is coming out of maybe 2/3 of the way up here. And I could change the direction of the stem if it seems like that would be a good plan. I don't really know what the leaves look like on this because I didn't capture that with my camera. And then there's a part of this other stem that's going behind. I may have to remove that a little bit, readjust. You guys probably won't want to draw as dark as I am because I'm just trying to make it so you can see it on the video, but you might want to keep it a little lighter so it's easier to erase. Okay, and I don't know what's going to happen over here. I'll just pretend it disappears. Well, I can go by what's going on here and just assume it's just going to be a pointy thing. So we'll hope that's right. And okay, so I have my contour drawing, ready to trace. And oh, let's try one more. And this one would be, I would say, would probably be horizontal. And I just printed these photos out on my printer. So I'm thinking it's going to take up maybe that amount of space. So on this one, I'm starting out with a different sort of overall feeling to the gesture to place it on the page. And then I'll do sort of an overall center and then the dark part. And then I can start to delineate some of the petals. I'm going to start with a petal that's more in the foreground, not behind. And so I've drawn in this very dark gray area here, and I'm going to start with drawing this petal. And then there's a second section of it here. So I'm not only looking at the shape of this, but I'm looking at what's being created in the orange part, or the lighter orange part around it. So there's one. If you break these down, it won't seem as hard. Then there's going to be a black area in there. And that would be really great wet into wet, that dark area. So then I'll do the next one. And just like we learned with doing the close-up nature you want to really study how it's growing. And then this overlaps that. That'll be a little fatter. So one little piece at a time. And then that's overlapping that. So slow it down and really look at what's happening. Don't take anything for granted. You don't want to just say, oh, I know what that looks like. It's a flower like that. You want to really study it and see what's really going on. And then even though we're drawing it somewhat realistically, we can end up abstracting it in different ways. One of the ways is you can do like a crayon resist or a oil pastel resist or a like a masking fluid outline. So you can get a sort of a colored linear look to it, which is kind of fun. And I'll show you some examples that my high school and middle school kids did for this assignment. I had them purposely use a crayon resist around it and then paint. So here's the next one. There's a little narrow gap between that. So slowly it starts to form. The more you add, the more interesting it gets. Now here's a nice little twist. Ooh, we love those. This is cut off in the photo, but I don't have to do it that way. And so on. And then on this center part, you know, I would see, oh, maybe break that down even further. So there's this middle part. And this would be great with salt. I'm already thinking, what technique could I use there? I don't have to necessarily draw every dot. I could use wet into wet to get an explosive kind of orange in there. And so on, and then some salt to create that. So I've got this, and this is where you want to be this week to have that drawn, and then tape it. You know, place it where you want it to be. And if it's too far over, I could easily at this point move it over a little bit. So use your judgment as to where you want it to be. I can kind of see inside, so I wanted to move it just a little bit. And then when you tape it on and you're ready to transfer it, don't try to avoid taping directly on the paper. Like I wouldn't put the tape right there. So put it somewhere where it'll go onto your board or someplace else. That's all. Just want to make sure it's not, okay. So it doesn't have to be on the top. I'm just gonna put this here. And the reason why we tape it is so it doesn't move around while you're transferring it. And I have my Sorel graphite transfer paper. There's sort of the gray side, and then this is the side that has the pencil or the graphite on it. I'm going to put it in there. You can even use a smaller piece if you have a smaller piece and just move it around so you always have it under where you're transferring. And I like to use a ballpoint pen. I like the red one so that it shows where I've gone and where I haven't. And again, I think it's important at this point to have your original reference handy so you can look at it again. And so I'm gonna, and I think with the first few marks, you wanna lift it up on that hinge and look at it, make sure it's working. You don't have to kill it. And I probably am pushing even harder than I need to. So I'm gonna lighten up on the pressure a little bit because this is a nice fresh piece of transfer paper. Yeah, so I won't have to push quite as hard. And so I keep looking at my reference, and I'm going to fix that a little bit because I didn't like how that looked. So I'm going to get the whole thing transferred, and then once you do that, if it's a nice fresh piece of graphite transfer paper, you'll get all these little smudges, and you want to get rid of those. So then we'll go on next week to painting it. Okay, so that's one thing you want to do this week. Get your drawing done, or first of all, find your photo reference. If you want to print it out and you have that capacity, you can print out some of the references I have on the Google Classroom site, and so you have a nice clear reference. Do a newsprint or cheap paper, thin paper drawing, and then transfer it onto your quarter sheet Arches watercolor paper. So that's one thing you're going to do this week. Then the other thing is going to be practicing some techniques for applying paint on small pieces of paper. And so I'll show you that in a moment.